Welcome to another deep dive, everyone. This time, we're going to try to figure out why humans are so drawn to stories. And, can we actually use that interest to learn English better?
Interesting question, right? I mean, people have always loved stories, right?
Yeah.
But, there's got to be more to it than just entertainment.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, there's a reason why ancient civilizations use stories, to pass down knowledge.
Yeah, and we still love them today, right?
Exactly. Must tap into something fundamental about how we think, how our brains work.
So it's not just a fun way to kill time.
No. It's more than that.
Okay.
Think about it.
Okay.
What's easier to remember? A list of grammar rules.
Yeah.
Or a captivating story.
The story with characters you care about, yeah.
Exactly. So we can learn English using stories and maybe even hack our brains a bit.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
But how do we do that? How does that work?
Well, we've got this conversation between Emma and Ryan.
Okay.
Emma's fluent in English, and she's trying to convince Ryan to use storytelling to help him learn English.
Okay, so Ryan's learning English.
Yes.
Makes sense.
But he's a little skeptical, I think, like a lot of us.
Okay.
He's focused on the traditional methods.
Like just rote memorization, you mean?
Yeah, like memorizing vocabulary, drilling grammar.
Right, the old school methods.
But Emma says that we can actually, hack our brains and make learning more enjoyable.
Using stories.
By using stories.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's her secret weapon?
She tells Ryan a story, a short story called The Power of Perseverance.
Okay.
And it's about a young artist, Jake, who overcomes all these obstacles to achieve his dream.
Wow.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
It's not just any story.
Okay.
She embeds key vocabulary words right into the narrative.
Oh, class.
Words like perseverance, discouraged, criticized, and determination.
So the story itself becomes a mnemonic device.
Exactly.
That's pretty clever. I like that.
Yeah.
Does that actually work, though?
Research suggests it does.
Really?
Yeah, because our brains are wired to remember information that's emotionally engaging and connected to a vivid context.
So when you learn a new word in a story, it's not just an isolated fact, right?
Right, it's not just a word on a flashcard.
Yeah.
It's linked to the plot, the characters,
Okay.
the emotions.
So it's more of an experience.
It's a multi-sensory experience.
That's interesting. But what happens when you finish the story? Do you just forget all those words?
That's where active learning comes in.
Okay.
So Emma suggests keeping a vocabulary notebook, like writing down all the words you learn.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense.
And then reviewing those words.
Particularly.
Regularly. Yeah, very important.
Okay.
But here's the key. She says to use the new words in your own sentences.
Okay.
And even write your own little stories.
Oh, that's interesting.
You really have to take ownership of the language. Make it your own.
So you can't just passively absorb it.
No, you have to actively use it.
Make it your own.
Exactly.
Right.
And that brings us to Maria's story.
Okay.
She moved to the United States knowing very little English.
Wow. Tough, right?
Very tough.
So did she did she take intensive English classes?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
Or hired a tutor.
Right.
But no, she had a much simpler tool.
Really?
And some might say more powerful.
Okay. I'm intrigued. What did she do?
Every day, she would read simple storybooks.
Like what? Children's books?
Yeah, children's books, fables, fairy tales.
Wait, hold on. Isn't that a little simplistic?
It might seem counterintuitive, but think about it. Children's books use clear, concise language.
Yeah, they do.
Often with pretty repetitive sentence structures.
Right.
And this provides a really fantastic framework for beginners.
So instead of getting bogged down in all the complex grammar rules, she was kind of absorbing them naturally.
Precisely.
Through these stories.
Through the stories, yeah. And don't forget the emotional element.
Oh, right, yeah.
Children's stories are packed with emotion.
They are, yeah.
Joy, sadness, fear, excitement. This emotional engagement helps solidify new words and phrases in memory. It's not just intellectual, it's visceral.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So she was connecting with the language on an emotional level.
Yeah, it's almost like she was reliving childhood.
Through these stories.
Through these stories.
That's fascinating. So it wasn't just about memorizing words, she was connecting with them emotionally.
Exactly. And there's actually a neurological basis for this.
Really?
Yeah. When we experience strong emotions, our brains release dopamine.
Oh, wow.
And dopamine is a key player in memory formation.
So those emotionally charged stories were actually helping her Imprint the language.
Imprinting the language, yep,
Okay.
deeper into her mind.
So she was unknowingly hacking her brain chemistry.
Exactly.
But I mean, how far can those simple stories really take you? I mean, I get that they're good for beginners, right?
Yeah.
But don't you have to move on to harder stuff eventually?
Well, of course you do.
Yeah.
But think about it like building a house. You start with a strong foundation,
Yeah.
and then you add more complex stuff on top of that.
So Maria's story is all about the first steps.
Exactly.
Yeah. Those important first steps.
The crucial first step.
Okay.
Yeah.
But how did she go from, those simple stories
Yeah.
to actually speaking English well?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Remember how she was writing down all those new words?
Yeah.
And trying to use them?
In real life?
Yeah, in her daily life. Well, as her vocabulary grew,
Okay.
she started using those words in her own stories.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So at first, they were probably just simple stories, right?
Yeah. At first, they were very simple.
Okay.
Maybe just retelling the story she'd read.
Gotcha. Okay.
But then she started to create her own stories.
Wow, that's amazing.
I know.
And using her own experiences, her own emotions.
Exactly.
So those simple stories were like a jumping off point
Exactly.
for her to find her own voice.
And when you use the language,
Yeah.
it really helps cement your understanding.
It's one thing to read it, right? But it's another to actually use it yourself.
You have to actively use it.
Okay.
And that's what she did.
So she starts taking more risks, right?
She does, yeah.
Starts speaking more.
Starts speaking with her neighbors.
Oh, wow.
Joins conversation groups. Starts writing her own stories.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, that must have been scary at first, right?
I'm sure it was, yeah.
Like to speak in front of people.
It's a common fear.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that,
Yeah.
I used to be terrified to speak English in public.
It's a very common fear.
But Maria's story shows that it's possible.
It shows that courage and persistence pays off.
And you said earlier that storytelling can actually reduce anxiety.
Yeah, research has shown that.
Really? How does that work?
Well, when we tell a story,
Yeah.
especially a personal story,
Mm-hmm.
we're taking control of our narrative in a way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We're shaping our experiences
Okay, yeah.
and sharing them with other people.
So it's empowering.
It can be incredibly empowering.
So it helps us overcome those feelings of self-doubt.
Yes, exactly.
Wow, so storytelling not only helps us learn the language,
Yeah,
but also gives us the confidence to actually use it.
exactly. And this goes back to what we talked about before.
Yeah.
The power of emotional engagement.
Right.
When we connect with a story
Uh-huh.
emotionally,
Yeah.
our brains become more active,
Yeah.
are more receptive to information.
So it makes storytelling really effective for language learning.
It's incredibly effective, yeah.
Okay, but let's get practical.
Sure.
What are some things that we can actually do to use storytelling
Yeah,
to learn English?
good question.
We know that Emma gave Ryan some advice, right?
She did.
What was it?
Well, first, she says it's important to choose stories that you actually enjoy.
Okay.
Something that you connect with personally.
It could be anything, really.
Yeah, it could be novels, biographies, even comic books.
So no more boring textbooks.
Right. Learning should be fun.
Yeah,
It shouldn't be a chore.
right.
She
Yeah.
also suggests reading out loud,
Okay.
even if it's just for a few minutes a day.
Why out loud?
Well, it helps with your pronunciation,
Okay.
your fluency,
Yeah.
and it helps you,
Get a feel for the language.
you get a feel for the rhythm and flow of the language.
Because it's one thing to read it in your head, right?
It is, yeah.
But when you say it out loud, it's totally different.
Totally different.
Yeah. Okay, so read out loud.
Read out loud and then summarize the stories in your own words.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Make sure you understand it, right?
Make sure you're understanding it. And it forces you to think about the story, the plot, the characters, the message.
Yeah.
She also recommends audiobooks.
Oh, I love audiobooks.
Yeah, they're great.
It's like having a teacher in your pocket.
Yeah.
But I always thought that actually reading was better.
Well, there are benefits to both,
Right.
but audiobooks really help immerse you in the spoken language.
So you get used to how it sounds naturally.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, and you can hear different accents, right?
Yeah, you can hear different accents, speaking styles, genres.
So it really broadens your exposure.
It really broadens your exposure.
It's like a crash course.
Exactly.
Okay, so audiobooks are good.
And finally, she encourages Ryan to write his own stories.
Oh, wow. I can see a lot of people getting scared of that,
Yeah.
especially if they're still learning.
It can be daunting,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to be perfect, you
Yeah.
know?
It's just about using the language.
It's about the process, yeah.
Okay.
And don't be afraid to borrow ideas from other stories.
Oh, interesting.
Like, retell a story from a different point of view. Right. Or change the ending.
Okay.
You know?
That's cool.
Just use those stories as inspiration.
Okay, so it seems like the key is to not just passively listen or read.
No.
But to actually use the language.
To actively engage with the language.
And to be creative with it, right?
Yeah.
Experiment.
And that takes us back to Maria.
Oh, yeah?
She didn't just learn the language. She really embraced it.
She made it her own.
Yeah.
And that's a powerful lesson for all of us, right?
It is, yeah. It's not just about memorizing things. It's about having fun with the language, you know?
Yeah.
Connecting with it emotionally and using it to tell our own stories.
Beautiful. So it sounds like Maria, she didn't just, learn a language. It was more than that.
It was deeper.
Yeah.
It was about finding her voice.
Exactly.
And that's something we should all strive for, whether we're, learning a new language or just trying to communicate better in our own language.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said earlier about storytelling,
Yeah.
You said it wasn't just about entertainment.
Right.
It was about how our brains are wired.
Exactly.
Think about it.
Yeah.
We've been using stories forever, right?
Yeah, for centuries.
To pass down knowledge, teach, values.
To understand the world around us.
It's like a universal language in a way.
It is. It really is.
So if it's so ingrained in us, how can we use it to learn other things?
Oh, that's a great question.
Besides language.
Yeah.
What if we learn history?
Yeah.
Not just from textbooks, but through the eyes of the people who actually lived it.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, or science? What if we learn scientific concepts by putting them into stories?
Imagine learning about photosynthesis through a story about, a little seed trying to reach the sunlight.
Wow.
Instead of memorizing formulas, we could, experience it.
Yeah, you'd feel more connected to it. So we could use this power of storytelling to make learning anything more meaningful.
More impactful.
Anyone can do it, right?
Anyone can do it, yeah.
You don't have to be a professional writer.
No, not at all.
It's more about finding those creative connections.
And making learning come alive for yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether it's through, reading,
Yeah.
writing, listening.
Even daydreaming.
Yeah, even daydreaming.
So, to our listeners, we challenge you.
Yes.
How can you use storytelling in your own life?
What can you learn through stories?
Don't forget to have fun.
Yeah, most important ingredient.
Because when we're enjoying something, we're more likely to keep doing it, right?
Exactly.
So keep exploring, keep learning.
And keep those stories flowing.
Until next time, happy storytelling, everyone.